So it's recording now. So yeah, so I guess firstly, for those of you who don't know who we are, we thought it'd be good to just do a very brief introduction. Who, what, and why are always, you know, the simplest way. So I am Bianca Praino, so the founder of Praino Careers. So it's basically a unique career consultancy where I specialise in supporting foreign nationals inside or outside the UK who are struggling with their UK job search and job preparation in terms of CVs, cover letters, and interview skills. So that's the who and what. I mean, I have worked in education for over 10 years. So I've worked initially doing teaching English in Asia, and then I retrained to do career consulting in Edinburgh, and I've been doing that for the last like 6 years. And my why, I guess, the last job I had working as a career consultant in a university, I really identified a gap of providing more tailored and bespoke support to international students. So the university I worked at in the business school, they had a huge number of international students from a variety of countries and cultural backgrounds. And I felt that a lot of them had really strong educational and professional backgrounds, but they just lacked some knowledge and understanding of how things worked in the UK and how to kind of navigate their way through the UK labour market. And they fell down on very small things like how to perform in interviews, how to write a CV in the UK format, and even understand the language of employability, which is, you know, it's the use of English for your career development. So yeah, so that's basically why I do what I do, and I feel that there's very much a need to support, particularly foreign nationals. And yeah, that's what I've been doing, and I really enjoy it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And Cheryl and I met through LinkedIn, and yep, so she's an associate and friend of mine, and really happy to be doing this session actually together. So yeah, Cheryl, your turn. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bianca. I'm also really happy to be here, and I'm really glad to see you guys too. So about me, I'm originally from the US. I live in Italy. I think I mentioned that. I have my own company called Cheryl Obal and Associates. So what I do is I help equip people for international experiences through cross-cultural competence training and preparation. And why I do this, and it was nice to hear Bianca's why. You know, she saw a gap and she likes to help people. And it's very similar for me. I mean, I have been living abroad for the last 20 years. I lived for 3 years in India. So hooray for my Indians out there. Hello, everybody from Mumbai and Kolkata. India is still very much in my heart. 3 years in India, 2 years in Korea, 1 year in Thailand, Qatar, Pakistan, 4 years in Saudi Arabia. And I'm not sure how many years in Italy, many years. Anyway, I don't want to tell you all because then you'll figure out how old I am. But anyway, yes, I have completely thrived on living in different countries over the last 20 years. It has changed my life in countless ways. And so now I love helping other people have similar life-changing experiences. So I get it. I understand that you want to move from wherever you are and go to another country, have an experience, increase your career possibilities, improve your CV, and just have a different perspective on life. I totally get that. I totally understand that. And so I like to help people on that journey.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, so this session, I mean, the advice and information we give is, you know, it's very much based on professional experiences, but also, yeah, personal experiences, having lived and moved abroad ourselves in our lives, and, you know, trying to navigate our career in different cultural contexts that are unfamiliar to us. So we can very much empathize and relate to, you know, the people that we work with. And yeah, so it very much plays a key role in the advice we give now. So thank you. Okay, so that's enough about us at the moment. So for you, yeah, so most of you have told us where you are in the world at the moment. So where you're originally from. So like I said, I'm from Edinburgh originally, and Cheryl's from the US, and we're living in Europe. So what is your current status as well? So it's really good for us to have an idea of what your current situation is. Are you employed? Are you a student? Or are you a job seeker? Or all three maybe? So really helpful for us to get that sense of who's in the room, so to say. And what would you like to get out of this session? So just, one sentence or even one word if you want, about what, why you've joined this session, what you'd like to get out of it. And also on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you with your interview skills at the moment? So the scale of 1 to 10 is 1 that you're not confident at all, and 10 is that you're very confident. So if you could type your answers in the chat, that'd be really helpful for us to get that information, so we can make sure that we tailor the session as much as we can. So I'll just give you a minute to do that.
Go ahead and type in the chat window what you'd like to learn today and how confident you feel. I mean, are you on a scale of 9 to 10, you feel super confident, or you feel like a 5?
There's no right or wrong answer. It's just,
yes, it's just about how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, don't be shy.
So what is the question again?
So the last two, what would you like to get out of the session? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you with your interview skills? Like if you're going to go for an interview today, how confident do you feel about your ability to face the interview and do a good job? From 1 would be, the least confident, and 10 would be the most confident. So how do you feel now? Okay. Kavi feels really confident. That's great. 10 out of 10.
Wow, you should be doing this session.
Yeah. Confidence level 7. Okay. Good. All right. Job interviews are scary, believe me. Even I still, no matter how many I've done, I still think I could improve my skills. So, don't feel bad if your confidence level is 5 at the moment.
Yep. Okay.
Great. Okay, good.
Great.
Good.
Yeah. So like we said, there's no right or wrong answer, and a lot of you will have different levels of experience with interviews, and some of you might already have some UK interview experience as well. So this session is hopefully you're all gonna get something out of it in terms of your own situation. So today, just to break down the format. So my part, I'm gonna focus on types of interview formats in the UK. So you know what to expect, and also how to prepare for UK competency-based interviews. So some of you might have experienced some of these already, but there's a specific way you can actually prepare, a very pragmatic preparation approach, and also some top tips for do's and don'ts. And then Cheryl is going to cover UK culture overview, and also cultural knowledge required for interview success in the UK. And then we'll take some Q&As at the end as well. But like we said, throughout, we're quite happy to take some questions as we go along. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll definitely answer those. So that's basically the breakdown of today. So firstly, to get your contribution again. So why do you think employers conduct interviews? So from your experience of interviews and focusing on the UK labour market and recruitment processes, why do you think UK employers do interviews? So it doesn't matter what type of interview, just why do they interview people? Mm-hmm. So if you could just type your answer in the chat again, and I think Cheryl will read out your answer. Again, there's no right or wrong, but just your opinion.
Yeah, think from the perspective of employers. What are they trying to gain by interviewing people? Don't be shy. Type it in the chat. Okay, good. So Priscilla says, measure your capability and handle the job specification. Very good. Yes, true. Nidhi says to get to know candidates beyond their CVs. Yes, check if they will be competent and suited for company culture. Yes, absolutely. Good answers.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, so spot on. So it's to identify your, your suitability, attitude, fit, and your motivation for the role that you're applying for. So in terms of those four things, attitude and fit and motivation are probably the three you want to focus on, because they already have identified your suitability through your application. So you've got to remember they've given you an interview because they think you're suitable for the job. So it comes down to how you perform in your interview, how you've prepared, and these are things that we will very much cover. One of my favorite mottos for interviews is to fail to prepare and prepare to fail. So I think we've all been there. I mean, I've had a lot of interview experience personally in my life, and I thought I had done enough preparation for some, and then I realized I hadn't, and there were questions I wasn't prepared for. So really over preparing is the key as well, and going in there with that confidence because you've prepared and you've practiced. So that's something to bear in mind. Fail to prepare and prepare to fail. Okay, so in terms of UK interview formats, so I've broken it down to these kind of four categories. So a lot of you, again, you might have experienced all or one or two of these types of interviews. At the moment, especially if you're applying from overseas, obviously, remote and virtual interviews are the most common at the moment. And it's obviously since COVID has happened, but also now that a lot of employers do have the opportunity to go back to face-to-face, they're still using remote and virtual interviews because it's more cost effective for them. And so you can most likely expect to be, to go through one of these types of interviews. So, for remote and virtual interviews, preparing for them and presenting yourself as you would face to face is key. So not becoming complacent and thinking because it's online, it's a bit more casual, or you could be more casual. Always dressing as you would for a face to face interview, making sure that you've checked your setup and your technology. So by that, I mean, your background is really important. I mean, I even have some calls with clients and their background. I think, oh, I hope they're not speaking to employers with that background. There was one guy who had like a bar behind him with all his, drinks and
No.
yeah, and people walking past behind. Yeah, so it doesn't look professional, and you want them to feel like you've made the effort and you prioritize that interview and it's important to you. So making sure you've got professional background set up and you've tried to log on to the platform already and everything's working, because these things do matter and they do give off a first impression. You want to give off a good first impression as well. Still, building a personal connection and rapport is, again, just as, if not more important online, because you don't have the body language that we used to have. It's not face to face. You wouldn't shake their hands. So online, it's even more important to nod your head or say yes when they're speaking to you, so they know that you're listening and that you're understanding what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Video interviews as well. So video interviews are where, and a lot of employers are using these now, where it's either pre-recorded questions. So you're asked to log on to a platform and they might tell you, okay, we're going to ask you 3 or 4 questions. So you could have a person asking you the questions, or it could be pre-recorded and you have to answer the questions as though you're speaking to someone. So it can be a little bit strange, and you stop the recording and you submit it to the employer, and then they re-watch it back, and then they will let you know if you are successful or not. So they're becoming more popular. Again, it's a really cost-effective way for them to interview. It's normally first stage, but the thing to remember is that, again, don't become complacent, because you're not speaking to a specific person, because they're going to watch it back, and you want to make sure that you remain professional and consistent throughout. And the ways to prepare for that is, you can actually do like a practice one yourself, where you make up some questions related to the job advert, and then you record yourself and watch it back. Of course, most people don't like doing that. It's quite it can be a bit uneasy listening to yourself and watching yourself, but it's so crucial for self-awareness and that first step to seeing how you come across to other people. So really important to practice that. So Yeah, so these are the two most common interviews formats at the moment that are being used. So in terms of preparation, so whether you have, you know, regardless of what type of interview you have, even if it's a phone one or if it's virtual, you know, you need to have reflected on your own skills, your experience, all of these factors here that I've listed. And this kind of mind mapping is actually very helpful to prepare for interviews, because you can have a mind map where you have skills and then you would list your specific professional skills and strengths and weaknesses, for example. So having thought about these variables is really key. So, you know, being asked about, oh, what are your main strengths and what is your biggest weakness? You know, you need to be prepared to answer those questions, and how you answer them is just as important as what content you give in the answer. So weaknesses, I would always suggest to turn a weakness into an area of development. So don't say that, oh, I'm really bad with timekeeping. You know, that's not going to get you very far if you say that in an interview. But saying that, you know, you used to maybe take on too many tasks at one time, and then that impacted on your time management skills, and now you're working on that, and you've come up with a process to allow you to manage your time better. So the difference is that you've turned that answer into a positive spin in an area for development, and you're not admitting to having weaknesses. So yeah, so these, you know, these are all, you know, equally as important, and it all comes down to how you prepare before the interview. And these things are, initially they're about you, but tying each of these things into the job and the organization that you're applying for. So for example, your career ambitions, your career goals at the moment, how does that relate to you applying for that job and that organization? So always contextualizing it and relating it back to the job and the organization. Preparing about the organization as well is, you know, it's a separate thing. So you're preparing about yourself, and then doing the research on the organization is just, I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And although you might think that you've done research by reading what they've said about themselves in the job advert, going that extra mile, reading things on their website, going on their LinkedIn, what are they saying about themselves on their social media, for example, you know, doing that extra bit of research will be appreciated, and it will be acknowledged, because they'll understand from your answers that you have went above and beyond the job advert and simply what they've said about them there. Again, you know, tying things into, you know, yourself, like their values and their ethics. How do the company values relate to your professional values and ethics? Vision as well, you know, what vision do they have? Do they have specific initiatives that relate to you and that are important to you as well? So this is all really, really key in the preparation. How you do it, you know, it's up to you. If you're quite a visual person, you can do it like this mind map, or you can write down the content, or you could even record an audio and listen to it back. You know, it's what works for you, but these are key things to prepare. So I guess in terms of, yeah, interviews, and you all have had maybe some interview experience, what's your nightmare interview question? So my one is, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years time? So I've been asked that quite a lot. That's quite a common question in the UK. And Cheryl, what's your one again?
Tell me about yourself. I hate this question because it's so broad. I don't know where to start with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
general. I'd rather they ask specific questions, and then I can easily know how to answer them. But tell me about yourself. There's so many things to talk about. What should I talk about? You know, I guess I have to focus on the information that's relevant to the job, my skills, which are relevant to the job, and why I'm there. But yeah, this is the question I don't like. Also because it's usually the first question.
Yeah.
So I'm not warmed up yet. You know, I'm not like into the flow of things yet.
Yeah.
So what about you guys? What's your most feared interview question? Which is the question you don't want to be asked? Type it in the chat window. Come on, guys, don't be shy. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Okay, yeah, that's Bianca's. What's your weakness? Yeah, that's a difficult one, Verinda.
Yeah, and like I said, just turning that into an area of development is a really sophisticated interview skill that you can easily develop. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to say what you feel like your weakness is. It could be, time management, or it could be, whatever it is. There's always a way that you can put a spin on it, and turn it into an area of development.
So Kavi says, what is your immediate plan? And Bala says, tell me about yourself and why are you leaving the current company job?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yep.
John says, yeah, the question about tell me about yourself is absolutely the nightmare. I still have problem to answer it. Can you give the tips? Yes, we will actually give tips on that exact question.
And also the one about why you leaving your current job. Yeah, so that's a very tricky one to answer, but always stay positive about that. Even if you've had a negative experience with your current employer or company, you don't want to reveal that in the interview, because anything negative will instantly give an impression that you don't want to give. So trying to word it in a way, oh, well, I'm looking for career progression, or I feel that I need to be more challenged, or, so always being positive and never bad mouthing your previous employer or current employer is really important in the UK, because they will judge you on that. And even though you might have had a really bad experience, it's how you tell the story, and that's quite important.
Exactly.
Okay, so thank you for those who contributed. So so we've got the tell us about yourself. Why have you applied for this position? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? So these are questions that are very common for any job interview, or even any stage of your career. You might be asked these questions, but they're basically to identify your motivation, aspirations, your personal attributes. So they want to get more of who you are. So like we said before, they've got your CV, they've got your cover letter, they want to know more about you. That's why they've invited you for an interview. And understanding the role and the knowledge of, and they want to see what knowledge you have of the company as well. So tell us about yourself. Yeah, so this is a nightmare question for a lot of people. And basically, if you focus on like 3 key points for this question. So this is it's a proven formula. It works, and it helps you have a focus for that answer, and quite a structured response. So the first thing is basically, a summary of your academic and professional background. But again, you don't need to reiterate everything that's on your CV. So you could say, I studied an MBA because, what was your reason for that? And also, I've worked in software development for 10 years, because I'm really good with systems and I really enjoy it. And then the second thing is what your current situation is. So, highlighting where you're currently working, what your current role is, and a bit about your career aspirations, and then always tying it into why you applied for that job and interest in the company. So that would easily, quite nicely lead on from your career goal, because your career goal is going to be aligned with your next move. So ideally, you're applying for jobs for a reason, and to include it in that answer, and to always tie it back to that job and company. It's really again contextualizing it, and it's more meaningful, and it gives your reason. And that's an approach, a way that I would suggest you could answer that question. But again, preparing, writing down that answer before your interview. And then breaking it down into those 3 key points so you have it in your mind. So not the mistake I've made before was just preparing for very technical based questions and very specific ones, and I didn't prepare for like tell us about yourself. And I thought, oh God, that's actually a very difficult question. So I've been caught off guard with that question before. But yeah, sitting down, writing your answer, reading over it is key, So that's more kind of vague questions. So these are more specific questions that are very commonly used in the UK. So these questions are related to your skills and your competencies. So tell us a time when you worked in a team to achieve a joint goal. What challenges did you face? Give us an example. Tell us a time. Any questions that start with this phrase, tell us a time when, or give us an example, they are looking for a specific example. So it's not a trick question. They are actually looking for a time when you have demonstrated a competency or skill. Okay, so some of you might have had competency-based interviews already, so you might know, but this is basically where you have to evidence your relevant experience through specific examples of situations where you have applied the skills relevant to the job. So how do you know what skills are relevant to the job? Well, they're listed in the job advert. So they will list the skills that they're looking for. So from that job advert, the skills, you then take those and you would make up example questions like this, or you would go online and research, you know, even if you type in on Google competency-based question for teamwork skills, they will come up with different examples, and then you would write your answers, and that's how you would prepare. But again, it's got to be relevant to that role, and making sure that you're quite rigorous in the skills and the questions that you're practicing in advance. The other, yes, okay. So just to give you an idea of variety of other competency-based questions. So these are 4 examples. So if you could just think to yourself, okay, what skill does each of the 4 questions relate to? So the first one, tell us a time when you worked in a team to contribute to a shared goal. Second one, give an example of a time you've had competing deadlines to meet. What strategies and approaches did you take? Third one, can you give an example of a time you were working on a project or a piece of work and encountered a problem? That's one I've been asked in an interview before. Tell us a time when you worked in a team where there was conflict. Okay, so thinking about what skill do you think the interviewer is asking about for each of these questions. So just take your time, and then you can put your answers in the chat.
So what skill is needed to work in a team to contribute to a shared goal? What is the skill they're looking for? Go ahead and put it in the chat window. Right. Okay. Priscilla says team player. Nidhi says teamwork. 1. Oh, she gave all the 4 answers. Okay. We don't want to give them all away so fast. Yeah. The first one. Very good. Bala. Yeah. You guessed it. Teamwork.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So the first one is, I mean, the most obvious skill that you can identify is teamwork. Yeah. Teamwork, and then organizational time management. Third one, problem solving. Yep, so you've got it. Negotiation for the last one. So a way to prepare for competency-based interviews, for example, if they've asked for teamwork skills, then you would, create a question like this, or get it from a website or online, and then you would think of an example where you have done this and where you've demonstrated teamwork. And always trying to think of more than one example as well. So if you could think of like 2 examples for each skill, that means that you've got more to go by in the interview. You can pull some out of your head, and also sometimes there can be a bit of an overlap. So it's not so clear cut with competency-based interviews in terms of the skill, because if you think about it, let's see. Okay, so yeah, so the second one, so give an example of a time you've had competing deadlines to meet. This could be organizational skills. It could be time management skills, but it also could be negotiation skills. If there was a part where where you came across a challenge and you had to negotiate to change the strategy or approach. So it's not so clear cut. So the more examples that you've come up with and practiced and written down and read over and revised, the more confident you're going to be, but also the more examples that you're going to be able to pull on in the interview. So for competency-based interviews, yeah, so I don't know if some of you have had these, but I don't know if you've heard of the STAR method. So the STAR method is basically what is expected for how to answer competency-based questions. So recruiters and employers want you to use the STAR method. you can, YouTube has, video on the STAR method. You can type it in and it will give you a rundown of what it is. But it's very widely known. It's a point-based interview system. So it's basically whoever scores the most points on the day is successful. And it's all about the preparation. Okay. So again, you've got the experience, you've got the skills, they've invited you for the interview because they know that you're suitable. So now it's time to make sure your performance is, going to see you be successful. So the STAR method stands for situation. So S is situation. So being as specific as you can about the role and the organization, any details for your answer. The T stands for task. So what had to be done. So again, you need to be very specific. You cannot assume that they know specific technical tasks or processes from your current or last job. So you have to really outline and explain the task. Action is for A, and this is what you did to get the task done. So any challenges or problems that you came across as well, and how you overcame these. So the last part is R for result. So what was the outcome, and always staying positive with the outcome as well. Because again, you don't want to have any negativity in your interview. You want to give off good vibes only, no words that would even constitute any negative connotations. Okay. The most something to bear in mind is that the action part is actually worth 70% of the answer that you give. Okay, so the action part is where you need to have the most detail, you speak the most around, and that's where you get in your skills, your attributes, how you did that, and what contribution you made as well, and the impact that you made, because that's what they're interested in. They're interested in you. It's your interview. You need to own it. And yeah, in the UK, there is that kind of focus on individuality and, what sets you apart, what's your unique selling point. And for some different cultures, that's quite difficult to get your head around because it's different in other countries and cultures. But in the UK, it is actually, it's like getting across your unique selling point without boasting or being arrogant as well. So it's quite a balance to strike. But yeah, the action part is the most part of the answer. So 70% what you say. So this is just an example of a competency based of a STAR answer, sorry. So this is the situation. So I'll just let you read that, yourself. So then this is the task. The action part. And the result. So any comments in the chat or questions about this answer are welcome. So this is a good example I'm showing you. A bad example would be, for example, on my degree, I had to do a group presentation. Okay, so we need to know what degree you did. What was the group presentation? Who did you have to work with? A bit more information, so a bit more specific information. But yeah, happy to hear your comments. I mean, does anyone think this is a good answer, or do you feel like it could be even better? I mean, they could always be better, but.
Bianca, I have a question about the STAR method. How would this fit into the context of an interview? Would you simply apply it when they ask a question, a specific type of question, and then you would kind of have the STAR outline in your head ready to say all the different parts? Like, what could be an example of a type of question that the STAR method could be applied to?
Yeah, so for example, for this answer, the question might be, could you give us an example of a time that you've worked on a group project? Or can you give us an example of a time where you've had to meet conflicting deadlines? So any question that they're asking for specific examples. So the key is in the question. So from those questions, oh, okay, right, I need to give an example of a time that I've worked in a group. And then you would have your STAR structure in your head. Ideally, you've prepared questions. A lot of companies now actually tell you the competencies that they're looking for and the behaviors. So the competencies and behaviors are often listed on their website, or they'll send you an email and say, this is what we look for, or it's on the job advert. So they are giving you that information for a reason. And, normally it's, they'll ask the first couple of questions, why have you applied for this role? Tell us about yourself. And they'll go on to competency-based questions. And they'll ask about 4 or 5. And like I said, it's a scoring process. So they score your answer. So the more detail, the better your chances of success. And yeah, there's a bit of controversy over competency interviews, because a lot of people say that although they're, great fit for the job, it's just that they're not great at interviews. So they miss that chance. But again, it's, if you prepare, anyone can prepare for these.
That's right. I think that it's very common for employers to ask questions like, tell me about a time when you had to overcome a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They love to ask questions like this. And I think the STAR method could go really well in that case, any sort of challenge, because they want to see that there was a process that you followed, that you approached it with a critical mind, and that you came up with a good result.
Exactly. And I think even if it's not a competency-based interview, if you prepare like it is, you're going to just, smash that interview so well, and you're going to be so successful because you have overly prepared pretty much. So even if it's not a competency-based interview, you're going to be able to answer questions that they're going to ask you. So yeah, I don't think we have any questions about this, no?
No questions so far? Nope.
So this is like it's like a kind of general introduction to the STAR technique. Some of you, again, like I said, might already be aware of it. But what has worked for myself and also people that I've worked with is to add an extra R on the end. So it becomes like be a superstar. So R stands for reflective statements. So the first R is the result. And like I said, always ending on a positive note, always, even if it was a really negative experience, you have to end your answer on a positive note, and the outcome should be, you should put a positive spin on it. But adding a reflective statement will ensure that your answer is really succinct and concise, and you can't be probed. So, you shouldn't really be getting probed or being asked to elaborate on your answer in a competency-based interview, because it means that you're not giving them enough information. So if you practice and in advance when you're preparing, you add a reflective statement, like this one, for example. So this shows that you have reflected on that experience, and you would always start with, oh, in hindsight, or looking back, I would have done this differently, or looking back, it worked really well because we worked as part of a team and we all played to our strengths. So showing that bit of reflection and learning and self-awareness will go, it will see you go a lot further in interviews, because that's really what employers really like. They don't expect you to be an expert, and they want you to show that you're human and that you are learning and you're growing. And you might have all the technical skills, but if you don't have resilience or a growth mindset, or you show that you're self-reflective, it will go against you. So that's a little kind of tip from my end. And yeah, in terms of, again, preparing for interviews, so going through that process where you are looking at the bigger picture first. So you're looking at, you're reflecting on your experience and your knowledge and what areas of your life you've gained experience in. It could be work placements, internships, your professional jobs, part-time jobs, volunteering. So it's perfectly okay to bring in examples from volunteering, in an interview. And it's better to show that breadth of experience than just focusing on giving examples of your recent job or your most recent job. So reflecting, looking at the bigger picture, and then interpreting as well your experience and your skills. So having that process where, okay, what are my actual skills? What are my everyone says they've got communication skills, but what kind of communication skills do you have? If you can speak more than one language, then you can adapt your communication skills, both written and verbal. You can speak and write in different languages. You can adapt, to different cultures. And, this is really, that's very valuable. So it's not just communication skills, it's the ability to adapt your communication style to fit different cultural contexts and to interact with people from different language backgrounds. So, picking out your 3 of your top, professional skills, and then attributes. So this is something that, they're big on in the UK. So attributes are things like personal qualities, related more to your personality type, your own life experiences, and things like resilience. It is something you can develop. So there's, some people say it's a skill, some people say it's an attribute, but things like your kind of the things that aren't so easy to develop and not so technical, they are owned by you, and that's about your personality type, and that's something to very much bring into interviews, and show that you're that kind of holistic human being that they want to see. And then you can specify specific examples. So then you can come up with your star answer. So once you've done this process, because this is it's really difficult, and I've done this in workshops before where I've gone in, I've introduced the star technique, and I've asked people to make up star examples, and it's very difficult if they haven't reflected on their experience and interpreted it and understood it, and then be able to come up with a specific example. So that's why I'm showing you this, because it's a lot easier to then hone in on your specific situations. So yeah, just kind of general do's and don'ts. I think so Cheryl's going to cover a bit more of these in more detail, but a couple from me. I think the main one is be careful what kind of questions that you ask, and I think Cheryl's going to cover this in a bit more detail. But if you're looking for jobs with sponsorship and you're getting invited for interviews, don't put up the barrier for yourself about sponsorship or the visa. They're interviewing you. They most likely know that you'll need sponsorship. So using your question bank for asking about the visa sponsorship isn't very productive. And I recently had a call with someone in my LinkedIn network who did interview someone who was in my network who's looking for a job from India in the UK. He interviewed him. He said the interview went really, really well, and he's a really strong candidate. And then at the end, he asked, "Oh, will you sponsor my visa?" So that completely put him off, and it's a real turn off, and it doesn't show that you're interested in the company or the organization or the role. So kind of, be patient with that. I know it can be quite frustrating, but definitely be patient with that. And the other thing is like repeating what is already on your CV and cover letter. So especially the question, can you tell us about yourself? It's very easy to then just verbalize everything on your CV again and repeat it all, but you've got to remember they've got your CV. They don't want to just hear it repeated. So trying not to get into that trap of repeating what's already on your application. And making examples up. So again, this could be unintentionally done as well. So maybe you've gone in and they've asked you a question that you weren't prepared for, and you try to then answer it with a star example, and you end up just making it up as you go along. And it's quite obvious when people are doing that, it will make you feel uncomfortable and it will make them feel uncomfortable. So if you struggle with that, you can ask them to repeat the question. So it gives you time to think about what you're going to say, and then you could use the star technique, but maybe you might have to be a little bit more vague, but still not making it up, or it's just never a good idea to do that. And I think so Cheryl's going to cover a bit more about these things here, about do's and don'ts, and more about how you present yourself. But in terms of the do's, so even remote and virtual, always dress to impress. So always dress as you would for a face-to-face interview, because it will be appreciated and it'll make you feel more professional as well. Body language awareness is a huge thing. And again, Cheryl's going to cover a bit more about that. But then, like I said, practicing, recording yourself, watching it back, that's where you can identify how you come across. And having just the awareness is the first step to adapting. So really, really good practice to do that. Or get a mock interview with someone, ask a friend, or get some professional support with that, get some feedback, And being punctual, i.e. early. So in the UK, being punctual means being 5 minutes early. So you need to be there ideally before the interviewer. And now you do have an opportunity with that with online. So you can log in and then you can be ready and prepared and taking notes. So this is something that, again, with virtual and remote interviews, it can be, it can look like someone's looking down at their phone when they're taking notes. So making them aware that you're going to take notes throughout the interview, and is that okay for me to take notes? So they know that you're doing that and that you're not looking at your phone, because that can be really off-putting and it just is a bit rude, really. So always read over your application again, so be prepared for them. They might actually say, there is a company that they ask the question quite often, walk us through your CV. So they're asking you to, okay, go through your CV. So you need to remember what you put in your CV, and again, elaborating a little bit and communicating your experience in a different way than you've done on your CV. But always kind of reading over your application and to remind yourself why you've applied, what the role is, especially if you're applying for lots and lots of different jobs. So reading through the application before. Yeah, and then just practicing is so, I can't underestimate, I can't emphasize enough how important practicing is, because that's what interviews are. It's, no one's born being comfortable in a contrived interview setting. It can be a bit unnatural, and sometimes it can be just as much the interviewers as it can the interviewees. So you can often have bad experiences with the interviewer. So as long as you're prepared, you've practiced, and you're confident, then that's all you can do from your part. And recipe for success. So research and practice. Know your why. So why have you applied for that job? Why you? Why them? There's so many whys involved there. But again, sitting, reflecting, and writing down your why, it's gonna see you prepared. Attitude is really key, and I think Cheryl's going to cover a bit more in terms of how how we can come across without even knowing how we're coming across. So attitude is really key, and first impressions last as well. So you want to make sure you've given a good first impression. So just to finish off my part, further follow-up resources and support. So there's glassdoor.co.uk, which is a fantastic website where you can look for jobs and apply for jobs. And also there's company reviews on there as well. And there's actually a section where you can look at interview questions that companies commonly ask. So you can actually see people that have gone for interviews, and there's most of the time there's a bit of a pattern with similar questions that the companies ask. So really good way to prepare. And then, the other websites like Prospects and Hayes is a recruiter, but they have a lot of careers advice section on interviews, virtual interviews as well, and what to expect in the UK. LinkedIn is really great for anything to do with interviews, reading articles, researching companies again, but also, even the hashtags, interview skills, interview tips. People have put on their information. Previous candidates have talked about their interview experience with different companies. So just looking at those hashtags is so valuable. And in terms of if you are looking for jobs with sponsorship, if you do want any advice on a visa or immigration updates from the UK, then obviously the gov.co.uk website is really key for that, and also UKISA. So I think, like I did mention, not asking about the sponsorship or the visa, but knowing the eligibility requirements for the visa that you're applying for is really key, because they might ask you in the interview, oh, okay, so you're applying for the, you want to get the skilled worker visa. Okay, so for you to have knowledge on what the eligibility is, what are the costs involved, is quite important. You want to be prepared for that conversation, but not initiate it.
And I think it's worth, sorry to interrupt you, I think it's worth repeating what you said earlier, Bianca, that, if employers are interviewing you, they probably already understand that you need sponsorship, right? If they get to that point where they have an interview, they would see where you're applying from. They would see that you need sponsorship and they would be prepared for that eventuality, right?
Yeah. Ideally they should. I mean, yeah, the way things are in the UK at the moment, it's not usual time, so it's a strange time, but there are still people getting interviews. There are still jobs with sponsorship. I send them out on that weekly mail list, and if they've invited you for an interview, they will most likely know if if you've had on your CV your address, for example. If it's in India or somewhere else, then they'll know that you're an overseas job applicant. But I think it's a difficult one because you don't want to waste your time obviously going for interviews with companies who aren't going to sponsor you. But I guess it's making sure that you're only applying for jobs where they've explicitly stated on the advert that they will sponsor. So it's the job search strategy that comes into that. And then if you get invited for an interview, you know that, okay, they know I need sponsorship, they're willing and able to sponsor me because they've put it on the job advert. So yeah, and again, I know it's frustrating, it is a barrier, but trying not to initiate that yourself, but wait till they mention the sponsorship element. All you can do is do your research on the visa type and the visa route that you want to get into, though, because for you to be aware of the costs that are involved for an employer to sponsor you is really key. It's a lot of money for them to sponsor you, especially if you're outside the UK. So, being aware of that, but focusing on, hire me because I'm good at the job, I'm going to be good at this job. You need to have that confidence. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, that's pretty much all from me. But yeah, wish you the best of luck with any upcoming interviews you have, and I hope you found it helpful.
Any questions before we move on to my part? Any questions for Bianca about anything you've seen so far? You can put it in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like.
Can I just say?
Sure. Joan Jacinta has a question. Sure, go ahead.
I wanted to, Priscilla's point about most organizations do not understand immigration rules. And that is I would very much agree with that, especially since January, where the point system has changed the immigration in the UK. And I think, that's where I'm saying you need to do your research in order to sometimes inform employers and have that conversation where you're very informed, and there's actually a link that you can send them if they want to request a sponsor license, or so yeah, I agree with that point. That is true. And sometimes it's part of the process to maybe have a conversation where you're educating them almost and signposting them to resources. And I've had previous people that have done that, and then the employer has sponsored them. So if again, they have to be willing to do that. So, but yeah, I do agree with that point. Yeah.
So Joan Jacinta has a question. What is the best response for tell me about your weakness question?
Yeah, okay. So I think, turning that into, putting a positive spin on that. So for example, say, choosing whatever you think your weakness is. So, ideally you've prepared that in advance and you've sat down before the interview and you've thought, right, what is my weakness? But you then pitch it as an area of development. So you say what your kind of weakness is, but then you also say what you're doing to develop, to improve on that weakness. So you're basically saying to them, like, I'm aware of it, and because I'm aware of it, this is what I'm doing to make it more of a strength and less of a weakness. So that's a really good way to answer that question. And it's putting that positive spin on it, and you're showing them that you're actually invested in your own development because you're actually working on that. And
I can give an example of that.
Yeah.
Because I always had this question and I always struggled with it too. And so I started answering it like this, and this is actually true. This is a true story. They asked me, what's your weakness? Okay. What I tend to do is I tend to take on too much work. And this is absolute truth. And so I'll be honest about it, you know, and actually that looks like a positive thing for an employer, first of all. Yes. And secondly, I did exactly what Bianca said. And I said that I tend to take on too much work. I tend to say yes to every request. When people ask for help, I want to help them. So I say yes. And then what happens? I'm completely overloaded, right? And I said, well, I've reflected on that practice. And now I've put some measures into place where I limit what I take on from other people. Like, yes, I'm available to help them. Yes, I'm willing to do as much as possible and work as hard as necessary. But I also tried to be more productive during the day so that I could fit in more of these requests. So, and then I just tell them I'm still working on it because, yeah, as Bianca said, you're human. So everybody's working on something, and that's perfectly fine. Nobody expects you to be 100% perfected. You know, when you're going for a job, you're always, I mean, we're always continuously in evolution. So yeah, my weakness is I take on too much. I get a little bit stressed out, or I get tired or overloaded. So I started organizing my time better. I started taking less breaks or arriving to work earlier, you know. So, and then I tell them what I did to mitigate the situation and how I'm still working on it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've used as an example in an interview where I was asked my weakness, because I also thought, well, that's quite good for a potential employer, that I am keen and I'm enthusiastic and I take on things. So it's thinking quite, yeah, like also it's still from their perspective of, okay, that's a weakness, but you know, that's quite a good weakness.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, are we ready to move on then?
Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks a lot for sticking with us. We'll move on to my part now, which is the cultural aspects of interviews in the UK. So give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen, Bianca.
Yes.
All right, very good. So I would like to start out by just asking you to reflect on how a UK interview could possibly be different from an interview in your home country or in another country that you lived. Think about the style of communication. Think about the way people behave and dress at work. Think about how they think about how they organize their day, and then think about how, you know, interviews could possibly be different. So the first step is to just opening our minds to how, you know, the process may be new and may be different, but it doesn't have to be scary. We can prepare ourselves for it. So just to open up the discussion about culture, it's a very short session I have here today with you guys, but I wanted to use the Lewis model of culture because I think it allows us to see a lot of different things about culture in a fast and easy way. Richard Lewis is originally from the UK, and he's a polyglot, meaning he speaks, I think, around 13 languages. And he's lived in different countries all over the world throughout his life. And he's basically a cultural anthropologist who made it his life's work to study cultures. And as a result of all his, 50 years of study and observation and working in different countries, he came up with this model, which is called the Lewis model. And he identified 3 basic types of communicators throughout the world, and then all of the different shades in between each of the main types. So the first one is multi-active, and these cultures tend to be highly active in conversation. They use a lot of gestures, with your hands. They interrupting is not considered impolite in multi-active cultures. The conversation tends to be very, active and emotional, colorful, talking on over top of each other and smiling a lot, using a lot of facial expressions. They tend to be relationship and family oriented as well. And then we have linear active types. These are the planners. They're the ones that like the agendas. They like to stick to the schedule. They like to rely on facts and logic, rules. They like to go by the book. They like methodologies. They like processes. And then we have the reactive types. These are the ones that generally listen to when someone else speaks and then try and establish the other one's position and feeling, and then they react. So they listen, pause, and then speak. They're very highly respectful. Hierarchy is a big part of their society, and saving face is very important. So what does saving face mean? Saving face is basically preventing people from embarrassment. So preserving someone's image. Now you can probably imagine some cultures that would fall on each of these three sides of the triangle. Think about it for a second. And then I'm just going to flash the full model here for you. There it is. So this is the full Lewis model. And have a look. See if you can find your country. See if it surprises you. See if you can find the UK. So the UK is down here. So the UK is highly linear active. Now, the thing to remember about this model and all of the models that we use in cross-cultural training is basically, these are supposed to be guidelines. They're not supposed to be rules. We're not trying to put, people in little boxes and say like everybody from this country behaves in that way. That's both ineffective and untrue. What we're trying to do here is just give you some guidelines and some indications for group behavior and business attitudes, let's say. So a little bit more about linear actives then, since that's what we're focusing on today. So UK culture tends to be very by the book. They like to plan in advance. They like their step-by-step processes. They are direct communicators, but in very polite ways, okay? They don't necessarily show all their feelings. That's what partly conceals feelings means here. They confront with logic, meaning if they argue against something, they're going to have some basis for it. They're going to back it up with evidence. They can be impatient when it comes to working. They like to see results. They like to see, let's get it done. They're very job oriented. In conversation, they don't tend to interrupt. There's this back and forth communication style. One speaks, the other listens, and then it flip-flops, okay? They usually like to stick with the facts. There's not so much body language and gestures going on when they speak. They're pretty reserved. And there tends to be a separation between work and family life and social life, meaning that work is organized in a very concise period, from say 8 to 5, okay? And at 5 o'clock on the dot, work is over, and then my social life starts. And there's usually not a lot of overlap. In other countries where I work, there was a lot of overlap and a lot of crossover between family life and work life. So people would, for example, leave work to take care of a family matter and then go back to work and then work late to make up for the time lost. This sort of thing is not that common in the UK. Of course it happens. Of course, we all have family issues we need to deal with, but in other countries, it's very flexible, like let's say the work and family life, but in the UK, not so much. So they tend to do one thing at a time. They tend to focus on one task, finish it up, and then move on to the next, as opposed to multitasking, 6 or 7 different things at one time. Punctuality is absolutely essential, and they're driven by results. So whenever we talk about culture, one good way to put it into perspective is to use this very basic pyramid model and to remember that at the basis of our human existence, we all have common characteristics. As human beings, there are certain things that we share, no matter where we come from, very universal things. And maybe you could think of some things like, the need for shelter or the need to eat regularly, the need to have families. Like we all, even if not everybody has children, let's say some people choose not to, but everywhere in the world, there are family units, right? So this is something common about human nature. Then we have the middle part, which is actually the biggest part of the pyramid. And these are the cultural characteristics. So it's important to remember that culture is not just about where you come from, right? Culture is not only about your country of origin. Culture has many layers. And this is where you would see all the layers going on top of each other to make up the belief system and the values that we have. And the other elements of culture are the things that influence us throughout our lives and the different groups that we belong to. Not only the country where you grew up, but also the religion you belong, the religion you follow, the family that you grew up in, your society, your school system, so there are like multiple factors. You could probably mention about 20 different factors that, there are different groups we belong to throughout our lives, and they teach us certain things that we then inculcate and make a part of our belief system. And then the very last layer we can't forget is the personality part. We are all unique individuals with different and special, preferences. So culture is very subjective to each and every person's experience on this earth. So you will never be able to say like, okay, all British people behave like this, or all Americans behave like this, right? It's just not true. And also we have to think of where these people may have lived, or where they may have worked. And there's lots of influencing factors. So the last thing we want to do is create stereotypes. And the first thing we want to do is try and understand the individual that we have in front of us. However, having said all that, there are some tendencies, okay? So like I said, they're not rules, they don't apply to everyone, but there are general societal tendencies. And there are some general unspoken rules and sort of codes of behavior that we follow, that are followed in all countries. And everybody's, let's say cultural conditioning is correct. Nobody is right or wrong, right? There's no culture that's right or wrong, or better or worse. It's just subjective to where you are. I mean, there's a certain way of behaving in the US, and there's a certain way of behaving in Italy, and also in the UK. So here are some British tendencies, okay? And you can see on the left side, we have some tendencies, some general behavior characteristics that you can expect in the workplace, especially. And just, I'd like you to brainstorm for a minute. You can take notes on your note paper. You can also type points into the chat window. And so I'd just like you to think, okay, since you know that they tend to be like this, then what should you do to adapt your behavior? All right, so being punctual and time conscious, what should you do to adapt your behavior? So I'll just put the first one here so I can encourage you to, so you know what I'm talking about, the kind of things. Oh, my clicker is not working. Okay, there we go. All right, so I just suggest, pay close attention to the time, and that means showing up 5 minutes before. So I want to tell you a little story about this, because in the US, we also have this value society rule, let's say, about being on time. But being on time is actually being late. This is what I was taught growing up in school. Being on time is late. Why? Because if you're on time, then whatever you're going to is already starting, right? So you need to be at least 5 minutes early, because then you can prepare yourself, you can sit down, you can take a drink of water if you need to, you can go to the bathroom if you need to, and then you're fully ready at the time of the start of your meeting or whatever it is that you're there to attend, especially for interviews. Remember that first impressions really count. So people are going to remember if you showed up on time for the interview. So next one, since British people tend to be direct communicators who usually stick to a plan. So how are you going to adapt your behavior? What's your ideas? Come on, type it in the chat window. Don't be shy.
Yeah, waiting for some responses.
Come on, guys, knowing that they're direct communicators. Now, remember this old adage, when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? I think it still applies nowadays, even though that's been used for years and years. When in Rome, do as the Romans. When in the UK, also do as the British, I would say. So it's just about matching your behavior, right? It's just about trying to follow their style, right? So
adaptation, like Priscilla said.
Yes, adaptation, right, Priscilla? So you want to adapt to their direct style. You want to try and, listen very carefully and answer the exact question that was actually asked. So try and follow the train of thought that they have. And then if you don't understand, you can ask for clarification. You can feel free to ask. It's not a problem to ask for clarification in an interview. Some people are scared to do this, but actually it's better to ask for clarification than to guess what they meant and then answer the question wrongly. All right, so the next point, since British people tend to be reserved in nature, they generally conceal their feelings and they stick to the facts. What will you do to adapt your behavior? Come on, feel free, type your ideas. Don't be shy. Come on, guys. I'm going to start calling on you if you don't answer. I'm going to start embarrassing you.
So we've got, yeah, needy, try to be practical and not very emotional in your responses. Don't go too much into personal details. Priscilla said, be original, but bearing in mind the culture.
Excellent answers. Very good. Absolutely. Yes, I think I had a similar point here. Yes, respect their privacy. Exactly. Yes, as Nidhi said, don't be too emotional. Yeah, and don't get into personal details. Absolutely. Very good. Don't pry for too much information. Pry means like ask and ask and ask again. You can ask for information about the company, sure, but you know, just keep it at a limit. And then since they're quick at responding to emails, people are very fast at replying, right? Maybe you've noticed this, those of you who are living in the UK already. And as a linear active culture, one of the things is keeping a high reliance on written communication. They like to write everything down. They want you to communicate via email. They want you to write your ideas down by email. It's a culture that relies more on written form. There are some cultures where verbal communication is more important. Relationships are more important. Time spent with people, emotions and things like that. Context are very much more important than written word. But in the UK, it's really important to write everything down and to be skilled at your writing as well. So what are you going to do knowing these facts? Come on, guys. These tendencies, I should say. Since they're quick at responding and they rely on written communication, what's your adaptation strategy?
So we've got be fast to respond to emails.
Yes.
Yeah, respond to emails quickly, take notes in interviews.
Very good. Yes. Yes. Very good. Very good answers. Yes. Just always keep in mind that, replies should be as fast as they are. I mean, within 24 hours or the same business day if possible. And include important details rather than general concepts. Like they want the details, the times, the facts, the dates, any other, relevant information should be included in that written communication. Right. So what about being polite and direct? So since they're polite but direct and they're formal in their behavior, especially during the first meeting, which is going to be with you because the first meeting is, your interview. That's the first time you're meeting them most of the time, unless you've talked to them on the phone. But, how should your behavior be? Come on, guys. How should your behavior adapt to the UK style? All right, 5 seconds, and I'm going to start calling on people. Okay, Priscilla.
Be polite and formal and prepared with seriousness.
Very good.
Not to joke around.
Yes, very good. Right. They may not appreciate the joking attitude in the first meeting. Very good and good answers. Okay, so yes. I actually put something about actual linguistic tips here, but yeah, these answers are also really, really good. I just put like work on your understanding of polite question forms. This is just a tip that I've noticed of non-native English speakers. It can help if you understand the grammatical form of polite questions. And we're going to work on that actually after a couple of slides. I have a little bit more information about this. And then you've probably noticed that British people like to apologize before they start questions. They say like, oh, sorry, could I just ask, some information about XYZ? So they usually preempt a question with a sorry. All right, so since they talk and listen in equal proportions, they don't interrupt, how's your style going to be? So how are you going to adapt to this? 5 more seconds before I start calling on people. Come on, guys. 5. Oh, all right, Nikki. Thank you. Yes, do not interrupt. Show respect.
When called upon.
Very good. Talk when called upon. And this is really good points. Good. Okay, Verinda said listen carefully and talk when asked to. Very good. So, and this is something that Bianca touched on earlier about using like signals, like nodding your head, saying yes, sure, like saying, like vocalizing a little bit during the interview. It's not interrupting. It's just vocalizing small words that can show that you're actually actively listening, right? Pay attention with your eyes, you know, with your whole face. So instead of thinking about the question that you're going to say next, or, you know, whatever you're going to answer next, you know, try to be focused, because you can see it on your face. If somebody's asking you a question, but you're thinking about what you're going to say next and you're not listening 100%, it shows on your face. So just be sure to listen all the way through, nod your head, smile, show something in your face and your voice that they know you're listening. And then when they're finished, you begin. All right. Now, since they're very respectful of rules and laws, they tend to be process oriented. Okay, what are you going to do to adapt your behavior then? Last but not least. Come on, guys. What are you going to do? Knowing you're in a very, I wouldn't say strict society, but I would say a society that does kind of do things by the book in certain situations, like they follow the rule of law. There's usually a very clear procedure. If you're dealing with UK government, you're going to find all the instructions outlined on their website, and you're going to find timelines as well. Right, Bianca? Like you can find information you need about certain procedures, and then you have a process to follow, and even have a timeline, and it's pretty clear. Like, oh, good. So Priscilla says, conform to their patterns, obey the rules and laws. Very good. Absolutely. Just keep in mind that in certain countries, like for example, I live in Italy, and in Italy, there's always a way around things. You know, it's a common thing. It's about the way things move in this society. However, in the UK, things are usually pretty straightforward. They're usually pretty procedural. So yes, follow the rules and laws, know the proper procedures, go through the right channels. Don't try to use shortcuts. I mean, you know, try and just follow the procedure and be transparent. Do you want to offer anything else about that point, Bianca?
No, I think that's a really important point, because even things like when you approach people on LinkedIn, for example, you send them a message, you know, you need to be aware of that. Yeah, there is a process, especially if you're looking for that sponsorship. There's a process of applying for jobs, getting interviews, getting the job offer, getting the cast, getting the visa. So it's being aware of that. No one's going to just give you a visa and you don't just pay for them as well and get them, you know. And yeah, so that's really an important point, actually.
Sometimes it can be confusing when it comes to job applications, because you may not be sure of the whole procedure. But in that case, I think we have to just wait for the signals of the recruiter. Actually, we're going to talk about recruiters in just a minute, about the whole procedure. But the last thing you should be asking about is, can I get a sponsorship? You know, and like Bianca said many times, I want to reiterate that you have to focus on the job itself. You have to focus and convince them why they should hire you, why you're the right person for the job. And then everything else will fall into place. They will be willing to sponsor you if they know you're the right candidate. But sponsorship should never be your first goal. So your first goal should never be just getting a visa and moving to the UK. No, the first goal is getting a job that you're suited for, and preparing yourself properly for the interview process and being ready to be hired. And then everything else falls into place. Once they realize you're the right person and you've prepared yourself and you've sold yourself well, then, you know, sponsorship would be the next step.
And can I say, sorry, there's something else we were talking about recently about, so people even approaching us, for example, and, you know, you've had it as well, where it's like, oh, I want a job somewhere, can you introduce me to people? And it's like, well, you know, if you've not taken that time to build up a connection with your Cheryl, and you're asking her to recommend you to people for a job, you know, why would she do that if she doesn't know your skills, your experience, that you're good at what you do? And you've shown no interest in her, what she does as a professional, what her background is. You've not attended any of her sessions, and you know, it's that kind of it instantly turns people off, and it's and then people wonder why they're not, like, people don't reply, and you know, they become bitter. But actually, you know, if you're just if you see things from the other person's perspective and you try to find that common ground and build that relationship, people are more likely to vouch for you. You know, if you make an impression and you're personable and you're interesting but interested as well, that's really key.
This is a really good point, Bianca. And it's true that I get this kind of question often, like, can you get me a job? Well, the answer is no, because the thing is, getting a job is a very long process. First of all, I'm not a recruiter. If I could get you a job, I would be more than happy, right? But it's actually not what I do. Even Bianca, like, this is not exactly what we do. We prepare people to get jobs, but getting the job yourself is actually a very, very long process that takes a lot of perseverance. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm just telling you so that you're prepared that it takes a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of dedication. Like, if you really want to do this and this is your goal, you can do it. Trust me, anybody can do it. Anybody can get a job and move to the UK if that's your dream. It takes a really long time. Believe me, when I was living in the US and I wanted to come to Italy, it took me years to find the way to get into Italy. And I won't, I don't want to lose time telling you my story because it's a really long story, but I can tell you that in every country I lived and worked, which is, 9 different countries, if you count US where I was born, every time I made a leap to one other country, I spent years trying to get jobs, but I never gave up. Like, when I wanted to work in India, it took me, so I volunteered in India twice, but I wanted to work in India. And believe it or not, it took me 6 years to get a job and a sponsorship in India. Now, I don't want to discourage you, like, oh, is it going to take me 6 years to get to the UK? No, probably not. It's probably going to take less than that. Every country is different. I think the UK is it takes a lot less time. It could take less than a year in your case. But my point is, no matter what you do in life, especially job search, it takes a lot of dedication, but you can do it. Don't give up. This is the point.
Yeah.
All right, so just a little bit, moving on now, a bit about regional differences. So we talked about how cultures are never all the same in one country, and then you have to think about the differences even within a country, right? Think about India with 22 different states and 22 languages. I mean, well, actually thousands of languages, and every state with its own cuisine and its own language, its own dance form, its own, way of living, different religions all over. So yes, same thing in the UK. Think about, okay, so in Southern Britain, people tend to be more indirect communicators, let's say, more like extra polite style. Northern British tend to be more direct. So those in the northern regions. And then Scottish tend to be very direct. Would you like to confirm that, Miss Bianca?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're very honest in Scotland, where we'll tell you how it is, even if you don't like it. But it's more of like a transparency, we're very transparent. And yeah, so that's like, perceived as direct as well. So if you're not used to that, you might get a bit taken aback. But yeah, it's very much the Scottish way. It's very honest, upfront, transparent, direct, with humor, of course. We like our humor.
All right, thanks, Bianca. All right, so just moving on, just try and be as polite and formal as possible. If you're not sure what their level of formality is, it's always better to go on the more formal side and the more polite side. Make sure your phone is switched off. It's just a friendly reminder. I know that, this is a common thing, but even the vibrator mode is kind of like distracting during an interview, right? Make sure you wear very professional and clean business clothing, like clean appearance, buttons and, not untucked, like everything kind of in its place, right? And all right, so about asking questions, I mentioned this earlier about apologizing first. And also I recommend using this indirect question structure. Oh, but didn't we just say that British people are direct communicators? Yes, but they tend to use a structure which is known as indirect question structure. This is just a grammatical term, the fact that it's indirect question structure. And I'll show you what that's all about right here on the next slide. So have a look at the question on the left, first one. When does the position start? So is that question grammatically correct? Yes, nothing wrong with it. But is it polite? I mean, Well, maybe in the context of a very polite conversation, it could be, and your tone also plays a part. But I would recommend using the indirect question structure, which is, do you mind if I ask when the position starts? So the part in red is just to show you how the grammatical structure changes at the end when you change the actual structure of the question. Yes, and Bianca just mentioned that tone is important. This is really true. Tone is also a big part of how polite you come across to others. And then, are there any training opportunities? Could be instead, could you tell me if there would be, instead of are, if there would be any training opportunities with this role? And then what would be my main responsibility? Okay, would you please explain what my main responsibilities would be? It just sounds a little bit sweeter, doesn't it? It sounds a little bit more polite and professional. Who would I be reporting to? Well, you can also state it like, I would like to know who I would be reporting to. See how the structure changes. It's no longer, I would like to know. It's not who would I be? It's not this same thing over here. See the difference? It becomes who, and then I, and then would be. All right, so we don't have a whole lot of time to go into this grammatical structure, but there's a link here which you can look at on your own to practice and see how this, the rules about this grammatical part. Okay, now, sometimes we also have to be detectives when we are dealing with British people, right? We have to think, what are they actually saying? Now, you may remember that there was an article written some years back about the indirect British communication style. And this little pictograph here went viral for some time on social media. It was a while back, I think in 2014 or 15. But have a look at the chart. It's kind of funny. If you can see the top part, what the British say, what the British mean, and what others understand. So have a look and see if it surprises you. Do you agree? Those of you who are living in the UK already, have you seen this very indirect style, and when it's may not be exactly what they're thinking or what they really want to say? Have you experienced this? Bianca, do you have any comments about?
I'm just, yeah, looking at them. It's so true. Like the one, that's interesting. You know, or very interesting is like it's when you don't really like something, but you don't want to say that you don't like it. So,
Right.
and I almost agree. Yeah. So
it's kind of funny. I mean, maybe tiny bit exaggerated some of the yellow part, I would say. Maybe it, like, for example, you are insane, the fourth one down. I'm not sure that's exactly what they're thinking. But yeah, this is a way of saying that actually I don't really like your proposal. But instead of saying, well, I don't like the proposal, they're going to say that's very brave. That's a very brave, that's a very interesting way of looking at things. And then you're thinking, what does he actually mean? So yeah, that's the pink part, what others tend to understand. They tend to understand what they hear, because that's what we hear and that's what we think is what they're actually saying, right?
yeah. No, it's just that kind of like the, you know, communicating, like trying to be very polite, but they're not really saying what they want to say. And, you know, like, you know,
Yes, exactly. It's because they're trying to be polite that they say things that maybe, you know, they don't want to hurt your feelings.
So then when, yeah, so when, you know, it's like someone is quite blunt, or they will say something, you know, the British are taken aback because it's like they're so used to trying to be polite and then trying to not say what they really think, that when they hear, you know, someone, you know, say what they really think, especially in a career, yeah, in a career context, they're like, oh, that's taken, you know, out of context.
It's a very interesting thing between Brits and Americans, because though they're speaking the same language, they're both native speakers of English.
Yeah.
They have completely different styles. So British, in fact, what you just said, that they get put off by this directness. This is a common thing between British and American people, because Americans are super direct and super blunt and super to the point. And sometimes it shocks British people and vice versa. Like Americans are expected, because we are direct communicators, we're expecting that bluntness too. And that's why we misunderstand British people sometimes. So it's a normal thing. It's human nature. I mean, we have different ways of interpreting based on our experiences.
Yes.
So good. All right. So just some of the etiquette. All right. We'll start with the don'ts. All right. Some of these we kind of already discussed one way or another, but yeah, opinions that are really strong, you want to try and hold back on that. Talking too much in general. In an interview, you want to try and make your answers complete, but also concise. And I would say, what do you think is a good length, Bianca? I was thinking like 3 to 5 sentences per question, and then, gently bring it to a close. What do you think? I mean, is there a general length that people should keep in mind that, if they're talking this much, it's too much? Like, let's say you're talking for 2 minutes. Is that like too long, or what would you say?
Really, yeah, it's a really good point. So like when I do mock interviews, I mean, you've got to, you don't want to give, 2 minutes is probably too long, but it's more about the detail that you're giving and that you're covering the main points and you're answering the question. So you'll know in a way if you're starting to go a bit like, your answer is becoming a bit long, and you can stop and say, oh, I hope, round it up and then say, oh, does that answer your question? So you're kind of asking them, does that answer your question? That's quite a good phrase to use in interviews. But I think, it's kind of judgment and experience, I guess. Like, just making sure if you focus on answering the question and you're specific, then your answer shouldn't be too long. So
this is a really good point. And another thing you can do is pay attention to the body language of the interviewer.
Yeah.
So when I was working in Saudi Arabia, I had a British boss, okay, really nice guy, but he is a manager, so he's really, really busy. And he had this way of being very clear when he was done with a meeting with me. And I learned to package my discussion into 10 minutes. So if I had something to discuss with him, I prepared myself with notes, and I timed it. Like I had an idea in my mind, like how much I could cover in 10 minutes. Because I knew that when 10 minutes hit, that was it. He didn't have any time or patience for more than 10 minutes of meeting. And I could see him start fidgeting. Like I could see him, like he had this way with his body language that used to make it very clear that, okay, this is time's up,
Yeah.
So, pay attention.
And at the same time, you don't want to answer too short answers, which I think
Right.
you go on to. Yeah. So that's another thing. Yeah.
Find that happy medium.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned already, don't ask about things like pay, holiday, or sponsorship. No emotion or desperation. Don't ask for the results right away. Even if you're so excited, like you really want that job, you don't want to show that too much. Remember, this is a reserved culture. So you want to hold back on your display of enthusiasm and emotion. You want to show that you're interested, but it doesn't mean calling every day for an update, or emailing every day for an update. You want to be careful about boasting, like, bragging, I should say. You want to come from a place of strength and confidence, and assertiveness, but you don't want to like go on too much about things that you accomplish. Just make it an understatement. Don't forget about your body language. So be calm in your demeanor yourself. And don't forget your PTE, please, thank you, and excuse me. Basic, British politeness is always expected. And try not to answer with one word. So this has a little asterisk here because Bianca and I would like to show you what this is all about. Now, what is a closed-ended question? A closed-ended question is something that gets you yes or no. Think about the examples. Okay, anything that starts with do. Do you like living in Italy? The answer is yes or no. Did you work at this company in 2016? Yes, I did. Can you speak Italian? Yes. Will. Okay, so these are all the kinds of questions that get you yes or no. There's not open-ended questions. However, we never want to stop at yes. So let's just show you how this looks. So I'm going to ask Miss Bianca a question here, and I want you to listen and think about how that impacts the interview. Bianca, do you see yourself working for our company long-term?
Yes.
Okay. Now, see how that just feels too abrupt? So we're going to try that again. Bianca, do you see yourself working for our company long term?
Yes, I do. So when I was doing research before the interview on the company, I came across some really interesting projects that you've worked on. I'm quite keen on the sustainability goals that you're working towards, and I feel like this is very much related to the experience that I have from my previous role and current role, and I'm quite keen to get involved in initiatives like that. So I really, I think I would really like the opportunity to contribute to that as an employee longer term, because it very much aligns with my own professional values and ethics.
Excellent. Now see the difference here. I mean, she answered yes, but she went on and developed. She brought in context. She showed about how she looked at the website and connected it to her own experience. Then it makes more sense. And then, the interviewer also doesn't feel uncomfortable, because if you just say yes and stop, then the interviewer is like, feels awkward, right? She's not sure what to say next. She's not ready to ask the next question. She's hoping that he or she is hoping that you're going to go into more detail. All right, so moving on, just a few more tips. So they're going to notice if you're familiar with the company. So they will know if you have read up on it or not, because they're going to bring into the conversation different examples. They're going to ask you different questions, and through your answers, they will be able to see if you really do know what that company is all about. And you have to just make sure that you've researched it and you feel like this is a fit for you, that you really do want to work there. And just look into their history, also the latest news. Bianca mentioned look into the social media. So I have a story I'd like to tell you about the social media. One time I got a job because I happened to know that the interviewer wrote an article that he published on LinkedIn, and it was about organizational culture. And so I just happened to find that article. I was looking into their social media, and I commented on the article he had written in the interview. And until that point, his face was very serious. And then all of a sudden you could see like a big smile spread on his face. And he was like, when he realized that, like, I read his article, he was like super happy. And, he said, oh, I wrote that a year ago. So he was really impressed that, like I had found that piece of information. So that's really good when you show, the company. Read the job description again and again and again. Find the things that match in your qualifications and, hook them up. When you're answering your questions, remember what was in the job description. Remember what you've done that matches that, and then highlight those. Things to keep in mind. Did you know that people usually make up their mind within 120 seconds of an interview, of the start of an interview? That's just 2 minutes. So first impressions really count. So there's several factors that go into this. It's like your communication style, your interpersonal skills, your ability to express yourself, your soft skills, the way you speak, the way you introduce yourself. All of those things are usually contained in those first 120 seconds, and people usually can make up their minds. However, then they do ask more follow-up questions to confirm that their initial judgment was correct. Do prepare 2 or 3 questions to ask at the end of the interview. They will always ask you, do you have any questions for us? You need to be prepared for this. So think about it, look at their website, think about things that maybe you'd like to know more about, or you would like to know, for example. So I think, Bianca, maybe we could deviate here for a minute and give them some examples of questions that they could ask a company. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of what I've asked companies in the past. I've asked them, for example, where do you see this department in 5 years? That 5-year question that they ask us, the candidates. I often ask the same thing to the company, like what are the main goals of the company or the department in the next 5 years? This is one thing. I may ask what would I be doing in this team? If I was working in this team, what would be, I ask about the people, or I ask about, I can't remember. What about you, Bianca? What are some good?
Yeah, it's yeah, so again, I would always suggest like writing these down in advance, because I've gone into interviews and thought, well, I know roughly what I'm going to ask, but then I've been a bit tongue twisted. So writing them down. But then always you really want to ask questions that are going to initiate a conversation and turn it into a conversation with them. So something like, I mean, I had a client recently, she came up with a good question. It was about asking the interviewer, actually, how did they get into their role in the company and what's
That's
their
a good one.
of the company. Yeah, I thought that was a really good question that she asked. Also about, training and professional development opportunities. That always shows that you're quite keen and you're committed to your own professional development. And the other one is, who would I be required to work alongside in this role?
Yes.
And then I've asked before, what are your expectations of the person that takes up this role? And what kind of person are you looking for? So yeah, and then anything that anything you really want to turn it into a conversation, and also think about questions that they'll like to answer as well, and that are interesting, that it's like interesting questions, like the one about showing an interest in the interviewer. They'll appreciate that. People like to talk about themselves, so you're building that rapport as well at the same time.
Very good. Good answers. All right. So, I have a story about this next point. It says here, be prepared to talk about everything on your CV and even the smallest project. So you may think that, I had this volunteer experience in Africa for 1 month, 3 years back, and it's not important. Or you may think that, I had this assignment over there. No, be ready to reply and discuss even the smallest thing on your resume, because that might be the one thing that they ask about. So just to illustrate this point, my husband also got to the UK on the highly skilled migration program. It's not called that anymore, right, Bianca? It has another name. It's right.
The skilled worker visa.
Skilled worker visa. Yeah, it used to be 10 years ago. It was called the highly skilled migration program. So my husband got into the UK on that visa, and he got the job that got him the sponsorship for that program, because they asked him about a 2-month project on his resume. And he was not expecting that, right? He was like, what about all my other experience? He was thinking, but that particular employer needed the skills that he had employed in that 2-month project. So they asked him about that, and that was what got him the job. So my husband interviews other people. Now he's a manager, so he's the one on the interviewing side. And what he told me is that a lot of times people aren't prepared to answer questions about everything on their CV, that they sometimes they go like, and they get tongue twisted. They don't know what to say because they haven't prepared answers about the small projects. They've only prepared answers about the longer work experiences. So keep in mind that. Also, I'm going to try to, all right. So let's move on then. If you get hired then, well done. Okay, I wish you the best. And once you're in, it's all about networking. So you want to really show that you have a very strong work ethic, and then you'll keep getting jobs. So if you're easy to work with, if people like you, if you make a good impression, you'll keep getting work, because recruiters do talk to each other. There's a thing called pub chat. They go to pubs after, and different recruiters from different companies will talk to each other. They will share notes. And you may just end up getting job after job if you're known as an easy person to work with, as a good employee. And recommendations of others should be understated. I know it's very common in some places to ask a friend to recommend you for a job. So you will have to be careful about this in the UK, and it should be understated. Like, if you know somebody's searching for a person, and then you have a friend that suits the requirements of that role, you can say in an understated way that, I know this person who has good skills, which he used in that other project, or something that is relevant, instead of like putting a CV on somebody's desk and saying, can you get my friend a job? This would not be appreciated. Recommendations should be, reserved, just like all the other communication in the UK, it's reserved. Also, your recommendations of others should be on the down low. Then just a word about applying through agents. Now, you may or may not go through a recruiting agent. I mean, it may be like a direct application, or if there's a recruiting agent involved or recruiter, a couple of the big names are here. Maybe you know some additional names. It may take some time. So in the meantime, so it could take a month and a half for the employer to actually make a decision and get back to you. And in the meantime, what do? You're hanging there, you're in limbo, and it is frustrating. I'm not gonna lie, I know this, I've been in this situation many, many times where I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and you don't know if it's yes or no. But in that time, you could use that to sort of get to know your recruiter. The recruiter is the one who's going to be following up for you, since they're in charge of whether you get hired or not. They're your point of contact between the company and you. So they are the ones that will follow up for you. So you can get to know the recruiter. Just, I would recommend don't do too many follow-ups because it might annoy them, but you want to show them that you're nice and professional and approachable and friendly and easygoing, right? So just a couple things about trends. The agents have a lot of insight into current hiring trends. So you can actually talk to them and find out, like, what are the periods of hiring for these companies, for example? What are the times I should apply during the year? There might be ups and downs with certain industries, throughout the year. They also know about the employers because they've been working with them for long periods of time, and when they usually know when they usually restart hiring. And then if there's a downturn in a certain industry and there's no jobs, there's nothing you can do. I mean, then at that point, it's like, okay, following up might not get you anywhere. And that's just a fact of life. So if you know that there's a downturn in a certain industry, then you have to just wait it out. All right. And then just be careful about too many submissions, because sometimes if you submit to multiple agents might be submitting for the same role, and that can backfire for you. Because let's say you submit your resume to all the agents and then 3 of them are applying for the same employer for the same job. And then the employer sees your resume come through twice, one from this one and one from that recruiter. Then it may cause you to be canceled out. Why? Because they don't want to have a conflict of interest between 2 agents. If they see the same name and they keep saying the same name popping up, then it might not be an advantage for you. It might be better to instead look and think whether you're really suited for the job. And this is something my husband told me, because he has a lot of experience now in the UK, and now he hires people as well. And he told me that it's better to think of the 70 to 80% rule. If you think you're 70 to 80% suitable for a job, then you can apply. It's, otherwise it might be a waste of your time to apply if you only have, let's say, 30% of the needed skills. And then just, ask your recruiter to tell you which companies he's submitting you to. It's your right to know this, and it's important to know this so that you don't oversubmit multiple times through multiple recruiters. It's important that you communicate with your recruiter and you know which companies he's actually submitting you for. So any comments on that slide, Bianca?
No.
Are there some questions? I see a bunch of chat. Okay.
Yeah, just one.
Some people need to go.
Yeah.
All right, we're almost finished. So I wish everyone all the best of luck. I hope that this was useful for you. And, like I was saying at one point, searching for a job in another country is hard work, and it takes a lot of dedication. And the point is, just don't give up. You can do it. And with that, I would like to just open up for any questions, anyone who, is still here. Thanks for sticking with us. It's been almost 2 hours. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask them now, or if you have to sign off, then you can always contact us later. So feel free, you can unmute yourself and ask. And I think, Bianca, maybe we could stop the recording now. What do you think?
Yeah.
That way they could even,